Hello everyone, welcome to our discussion in the course Philippine Pop Culture. And for today, we will be talking about Lesson 5, Psychoanalysis. Now, what is psychoanalysis? Developed by Sigmund Freud back in 1896, psychoanalysis is, plainly put, a form of therapy that he popularized as a treatment for mental health disorders. But more than that, many psychologists would agree that psychoanalysis marks the beginning of psychotherapy, and while it may incredibly scientifically flawed and unpopular, today it's kind of a big deal. So let me give you the skinny on what it is exactly. In order to understand Freud's psychoanalysis, we first need to understand what it believes. So psychoanalysis theorizes that human personality can be divided into two parts, the conscious and the unconscious mind. On a daily basis, these two parts, the unconscious and unconscious, are constantly in conflict. In the end, mature human behavior is the compromise between two belligerent roommates. And to make things a little more complicated, Freud's psychoanalysis proposes that the human psyche, the mind that is comprised of three parts: the id, the ego, and the superego. The id is sort of like a little Jabba the Hutt. It includes all of your immediate desires, like your desire for food, for sex, aggression, and shiny things. It's instinctual and impulsive, and well, kind of ugly. It has no morality, it just knows what it wants. The superego, on the other hand, is sort of like your internal Captain America. Essentially, it tells you what's right and wrong based on what you've learned to be socially acceptable. It always follows the rules. And the ego is essentially Judge Judy. It hears both sides, makes sense of all the information, and gives a final decision about how you should behave. Okay. Psychoanalysis theory says that conflict between the desire to ravage and social order results in the development of defense mechanisms to keep the id from rearing its ugly features, its ugly head. And those defense mechanisms keep us safe from the guilt and anxiety we would feel if we ever gave in to our innermost desires. This is the theory that psychoanalysis gives for mental illness. When the unconscious conflicts become too intense and the defense mechanisms are too restrictive, the individual show mental health symptoms. Now that we know what psychoanalysis believes, let's move on to how it's done. When you think about psychoanalysis, you may associate it with dream analysis. For example, dreaming about snakes means some friend of yours will betray you, or dreaming about lava means you have a deep anger. But the most important aspect of psychoanalysis is free association. This is where the individual says whatever is on their mind, no matter how trivial, incoherent, or repulsive it might be. The analyst would still listen without disclosing it to someone. So much of Freud's analysis involved dreams, and his book Interpretation of Dreams was completed in 1899. Freud said in his book that dreams functioned only to be guardians of sleep. In 1925, he said it plainly: there is only one useful task, only one function that can be ascribed to a dream, and that is the guarding of sleep from interruption. Sleep is threatened in three directions: external stimulus, recent events, and repressed instinctual impulses. To understand this model, we need to understand that infant and waking life were full of emotions, drives, wishes, and experiences that our minds simply couldn't consciously handle, and that loaded psychic material would regularly repressed or buried in the unconscious. The problem is during our sleep, there is less automatic repression. These latent dream thoughts would bubble up. If unchecked, these infantile wishes, drives, and traumas would be experienced in ways that would be so intense that people would repeatedly wake up. And if people experiences this, they would suffer from sleep deprivation and increasing mental impairments until they simply couldn't function anymore. Dreams guard sleep by incorporating potential disturbances into the narrative of the dream. If, for example, a noise sounds during sleep, a dream will attempt to include the noise in its narrative organization. Similarly, when a sleeper experiences somatic disturbances or the need to pee, that's the basic example, the dream will attempt to accommodate this in order not to disturb the dreamer's sleep. However, outside and inside stimulus of this sort is always transformed. As he explains, dreams do not simply reproduce the stimulus, they work it over. They make allusions to it, they include it in some context, they replace it by something else. For example, you were dreaming that you were watering the plants, but in reality you peed in your sleep already, and that is what he's trying to say here. The dream will attempt to accommodate this in order not to disturb the dreamer's sleep. Therefore, although we can recognize how outside stimulation may contribute something to a dream, it does not explain why or how this something is worked over. Similarly, dreams are also informed by recent experiences, the day's residues, that's what Freud call it. This may often determine much of the content of a dream, but as Freud insists, as with noise and somatic disturbances is merely the material out of which the dream is formulated and is not the same as the unconscious wish. As he explains, the unconscious impulse is the true creator of the dream. It is what produces the physical energy for the dream's construction. Okay, so that will wrap up Freud's psychoanalysis. And now let's proceed to the Lacanian psychoanalysis. Thank you.
Good day everyone, good day ma'am. Today I'm going to discuss about Lacanian psychoanalysis by Jacques Lacan. And first I get to know about Lacanian psychoanalysis. So what is this Lacanian psychoanalysis? According to Lacan, we are born into a condition of luck and subsequently spend the rest of our lives trying to overcome this condition or trying to experience this. Luck is experienced in different ways and in different things, but it is always a non-representable expression of the fundamental condition of being human, being just like a remain an imagination of us. Now, because we are born into a condition of luck and subsequently spend the rest of our lives trying to experience this or trying to face this condition, the result of this is an endless quest or search of an imagined moment of plenitude. Now, Lacan figures this as a search of what he terms I object PTA or object A. The meaning of this is that this object A is which is desired but forever out of reach. It's like a lost object of signifying an imaginary moment in time, and we are unable to take over this, or we are unable to take ever take hold of this object. So that what means the Lacanian psychoanalysis. And now let's move on to the three developmental stage or gestures. So what are these developmental stage or gestures? The first developmental stage is the mirror stage, or Lacanian term it as the imaginary register order. The second one is the game, originally named by Freud, and Lacanian term it as the symbolic register order, and the last one is the Oedipus complex, or as Lacanian term it, the real register. The mirror stage or the imaginary gesture. As Lacan points out, we are all born prematurely or immature. It takes time to be able to control or coordinate our movements. And this, Lacan said that this has not been fully accomplished when the infant or the child first sees itself in a mirror between the ages of 6 to 18 months. The infant, still sunk in motor incapacity and nursing dependence, forms an identification with the image in the mirror. When the infant sees itself in the mirror, it sees not only an image of itself, its current self, but also the promise of a more complete self. It's like a promise that the ego begins to emerge, and as the infant sees itself in the mirror, the ego of the child emerge. We all know that ego is like a thinker of our thoughts, just like a someone within us. Okay, now uh, Lacanian also said that the mirror face heralds the moment of entry into another order of subjectivity, and subjectivity, as Lacan called it, as imaginary. So first, let's talk about the what does the mirror stage all about. So human beings are born in an immature or premature state, just like what I've said earlier, and usually and gradually being able to walk and talk. And Lacan wondered how children develop their relationship on their bodies. He postulated based on an animal behavior and child between ages to 6 and 18 months, and identify with their image in a mirror, and that gives the child the jubilant perception of itself as a whole and complete in contrast to the child's inner experience of being fragmented and disconnected. And just like what I've said earlier, that the mirror face heralds the subjectivity, as Lacan called it, the imaginary. So what is this imaginary register? Following his description of a mirror stage, Lacan's made a profound leap. Um, he postulated that the child's perception of self in the mirror is characteristic of one of the three registers of orders in which human beings experience the whole world, and he called it the imaginary. The imaginary gesture is the world of sensation, visual, olfactory, auditory, and tactile, and is the registers we use to compare ourselves to others. Like, for example, when we meet a foreigner um, for the first time, our initial impressions takes place in the imaginary gestures, and because of that, um, because of our expression to that person, or to that foreigner, um, we just indeed judging the book by its cover, and that's what means the imaginary all about. And now we're on the second developmental stage and register, which is the fourth the game and the symbolic register. So what is this fourth the game? Fourth the game, originally named by Ford after watching his grandson um, throw the real cotton away, and the child put it back as a means of a thread. In other words, um, the child compensates for his mother disappearance by taking control of the situation, and he makes her disappear, which means fourth, and make it and then reappear, which is a the. And Freud said that the game is beyond pleasure, beyond the pleasure principle, and it shows the child transforming the situation, an unhappy situation, into an happy one. And Lacan rereads this as a representation of the child beginning to enter into symbolic, and this particular into its language. And Lacan says that the moment we decide to become human is also which is also that which the child's born into language. And like the fourth again, language is a is a presence made of absence. Um, the ones we enter language, the completeness of the real is gone forever. Now let's talk about the symbolic register. So what is the symbolic register? Symbolic register, Lacan. So what is the symbolic register? Lacan developed the idea of symbolic register as a part of human existence that includes language, culture, traditions, rituals, and religion. This symbolic register is waiting for us when we are born. Um, and our parents have already selected a name for us, and we learn the language of our family and we take part of their rituals or traditions. And that's why it is no accident that the children of musicians, engineers, celebrities, artists, physicians, lawyers often follow in their parents' career. This register increasingly takes its place along the side of the imaginary gesture. Like for example, when the mother telling her child who's being held up and facing the mirror, and the mother said that, "Oh, you got your godma's eyes, you got your father's face, you got your auntie or tita eyes." Um, by that moment, the child would later identify with the rebel against or do some of which with what it has absorbed through symbolic register. And now we're on the last developmental stage and register, which is the Oedipus complex and the real register. The third stage of development is the Oedipus complex. Successful completion of the Oedipus complex enforces our transition from the imaginary to symbolic. For Lacan, desire is the hopeless of the fixed signified, always forever becoming another, the incessant sliding of the signified under signifier. And later we'll get to know about signifier to signified. And also Lacan said that desire exists in the impossibility of closing the gap between self and other to make good that which we lack. And now let's get to know about the signifier and signified. Lacan became particularly interested in the work of Ferdinand de Saussure, one of the founders of the 20th century linguistics. De Saussure described the linguistic design composed of number one, a signifier, or in other words, acoustic image of the word we hear connected to number two, the signified or the concept. Like for example, the sound of the word ox will make an acoustic impression on the listener, on the to the people to or to the person who listen. However, each of us will have somewhat a different idea of what it is looks or what it looks like, or what is this ox is like. For some of us, it will be a person's name, a movie, a novel, uh, a place, or a painting. And because of this, we have this different idea. Therefore, the signified in this example is the concept of an ox, and not again in this example is the concept of an ox and not a particular ox. And because of this, Lacan famously said that conscious is structured like a language. He meant that the unconscious is made up of chains called repressed signifiers that relate to one another through their own rule of metaphor and metonymy. These repressed signifiers express themselves through shapes of the tongue, association to dreams, mistaken actions through uh, psychiatric symptoms. And now let's get to know about the real register. Lacan identified a third register of human existence, the real, whereas the imaginary register in the world of images sensory perceptions, and the symbolic is based on language and gives meaning to everything around us. The real is what is whatever else there is, and that is devoid of meaning. Before and soon after a baby, for example, before and soon the baby is born and has not yet acquired words and language, the child is still living in the real register. And as soon as it learns to say mama, papa, kuya, ate, and other signifiers, the baby has begun to take part in the symbolic register, and that makes the cut in the real register. Because again, the in the symbolic register is a part of human existence that includes language, and in symbolic register, we learn language from our family, and the child begins to learn language. It makes a cut in the real register, meaning um, is the child will no longer remain in the real register, and that's what this means, the real register all about. That's the end of my report, which is the Lacanian psychoanalysis by Jacques Lacan. By the way, I forgot to introduce myself. I am Estal Jeson reporting the Lacanian psychoanalysis. Um, so that's the end of my report. Goodbye and stay safe.
Cine-psychoanalysis, or psychoanalytic film theory. Psychoanalytic film theory is a school of academic thought that evokes the concepts of psychoanalysts Sigmund Freud and Jacques Lacan. It's closely tied to critical theory and apparatus theory. Film screen serves as a mirror through the spectator can identify himself or herself as a coherent and omnipotent ego. According to Andre Breton, the founder of surrealist movement, saw film as a means of engaging the unconscious. Christian Mitz and Laura Mulvey separately explore the aspects of the gaze in the cinema in the early 1970s, where Christian Mitz and Laura Mulvey separately explored the aspects of the gaze. In cinema in 1970s, Christian Mitz's identification is more focused on camera vision, while Laura Mulvey is focused on aspects of the female viewers regards for the on-screen female body, which she wrote a book entitled Fetishistic. Fetishistic means the displacement of desire and fantasy of body parts. The second wave of psychoanalytic film theory is object of desire. From the 1990 onward, the matricial theory of artist and psychoanalyst Branka L. Ittinch revolutionized feminist film theory, her concept of matricial gaze. So what is feminist film theory? This theory is focused on the functions of women characters in a particular film narratives or genres. The stereotypes and society's view of women, which Branca's concept of matricial gaze. Freud's concepts are all utilized in film theory. These are Oedipus complex, narcissism, castration, the unconscious, the return, and hysteria. So what is Oedipus complex? Oedipus complex, the complex of emotions occurred in a young child, typically around the age of 4, by an unconscious sexual desire for the parent of the opposite sex, and which is include the parents of the same sex. So the next one is narcissism. Narcissism is the pursuit of gratification from vanity or egoistic admiration of one's idealized self-image and attributes. The third one is castration. So castration is the action, surgical, chemical, or otherwise, by which an individual loses use of the testicles. So the next one is the unconscious. This theory of personality, the unconscious mind, is defined as a reservoir of feelings, thoughts, urges, and memories that outside unconscious awareness. The next one is the return. According to Freud, it is the insistent return of the repressed that can explain numerous phenomena that are normally overlooked. Freud called it himself as parapraxis. The last concept of Freud is the hysteria. It is a pejorative term used to colloquially to mean ungovernable emotional access and can refer to a temporary state of mind or emotion. Cinema remains a site for dissemination of ideology, but it has also become a potential site of political and psychic disruption. The initial aim of second wave was to create an authentic Lacanian film theory that would approach the cinema with the complicity that is merited. So the main proponent of this second wave of psychoanalytic film theory are Johann Kopczyk and Slovak Zizek, though the latter has received much more recognition and has produced more work. Kopczyk's early work has more revolutionary. Both waves of psychoanalytic film theory has remained Jacques Lacan, to a lesser extent of Sigmund Freud. So here are the terms that we use in previous slide. So the first term is fetishism, functions as the exemplary perversion for Freud. Another term is the gaze. Gaze means the way that character looks with their eyes and face. Another term is the feminist theory. Feminist theory is focused on the functions of women characters. The last one is matricial gaze, in Freudian meaning of pre-Oedipal sexuality. That's it. Thank you for listening.